Welcome, everyone, to AV Unplugged. This is our very first episode of the show. Brand new podcast from AVIXA. We're going to be talking to some of the most influential leaders in and around pro AV industry. We're thrilled to be joined today with a couple friends from Ross Video. I'm Mark Metzger with AVIXA. We're here with Matt Morgan, with Peter Fitton as well. We are coming to you from the AVIXA TV studio. You guys are one of the first guests here in the studio. Welcome. This is going to be a great conversation because actually our friends at Ross are helping us out kind of equipping this space. So we thought it'd be a great conversation because a lot of corporations are kind of doing similar to what we're doing right now, which is we've taken an old conference room, turned it into a space for podcasting, for green screen, all sorts of things. We're going to talk through a little bit of the technology that we're using in this space today, but also want to kind of touch on some of the broader trends that are happening when it comes to corporate and broadcast AV. Matt, Peter, thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Let's start kind of big picture first. The last 10 years or so, we talk a lot about the convergence of broadcast and AV systems in particular, thinking about corporate as well. From the manufacturer side, what are you all seeing in the last 10 years? Obviously, we've had a pandemic in there that's really changed things, but just at a high level, what's that evolution been like from the manufacturer side?
I'd say even rewinding further, you had the convergence of IT and AV, where when I lived in DC and I was doing AV support and installations, I had to learn how a network switch interacted with AV functions. And now the convergence of broadcast and AV and IT are all kind of coming together. And I think the biggest thing that people are noticing and realizing as they move into this space is that there is way more eyes on branding, on engagement, not only from an internal perspective, from an external perspective as well. A lot of people are under scrutiny in the news, and they have to do live segments with, people on all your three-letter networks in New York who are asking them hard questions. So it's branding, it's engagement, it's driving revenue. But the biggest thing is that video is attached to an outcome that's important for the customer, which is why we're all doing these things now.
Mm-hmm. So kind of what Matt was saying is like there's so much more of a focus on content now and the way it's presented. 10, 15 years ago, the content was important, but it didn't really matter. It was just it's just getting it out there, right? It could be as simple as an email or, somebody just sitting at their desk and talking, but that's not engaging. We're bombarded now with so much content. Like we're conditioned to, engaging with and paying attention to something that catches our eye, that looks really good, right? We have really short attention spans now. Yeah. And so that's important. I think even, internal communication with corporations, just being able to stay engaged as an employee with what leadership is saying is, it's hugely important now.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that's going to be cool about this conversation, like I said, is that I'm kind of seeing this from almost like the customer side of things, not just here with AVIXA, but my previous employer, we built out a studio as well. And one of the things that's been interesting is that when I started 10 years ago at my previous job, we had 2.5 people dedicated to video. Mm-hmm. And I thought at the time, I was like, well, that's pretty awesome, By the time I left 8 years later, we had 6 people dedicated just to video. And, on top of that, there were writers, there were other people who were supporting the video team too. Mm-hmm. So just the rise of in-house video teams has been, great for my career in one sense, great. There are more opportunities out there. But interesting to see the ways that, it's not just now, like we were saying, kind of content, but there's also more of the broadcast technologies that are involved. So, for example, the first studio I did, it was just kind of a space for us to put a camera on tripods, but we need to do more nowadays. So what does that, again, kind of look like from your perspective, especially since the pandemic? How are broadcast technologies being leveraged in corporate applications more now?
Yeah, I feel like the media teams before, 5+ years ago, where it was 1 to 2 people, there was a specific project, like we're doing this initiative, we need video content to like show our people, or we're going to do an HR training, so let's record it, and you have your outcome, and you're going to package up, deliver it. And those people in 2020 then turned into I need you to do Zoom calls. I need you to do content. And it turned the heat up on a lot of functions of those people, which I think is what drove those teams to really start having an emphasis on video and what that means for video. And I think, so during that whole time, we all, if you weren't already equipped with some solutions, so at the time I was a Ross customer, and thankfully I had a solution to where I wasn't having to buy a bunch of random things last minute and waiting on, things to ship to me, or even just leveraging like a SaaS platform or something in order to connect with people. So we were fortunate in that regard. But because of that, there were a lot of people who had to be reactionary, learn an entire new way of doing video, capturing something live, and then what do I do with this once it's live? If it's out there, oh no, it's out there, and I want to edit it, or a CEO wants to edit something, and they're like, well, we can't because it's just out there. Yep. And so a lot of people had to learn trial by fire to understand what this all is. And now kind of coming on the other side of it, there's been a lot of really wanting to learn and engage, which when I first started working with AVIXA, with you all on this, it became this conversation because of the need of the convergence of broadcast and AV, which was reactionary to what the world did. And so I feel like that the trend really right now, it's starting to really understand what that means and why it's grown, and leveraging a new skill set, if you will, in what today's media world looks like, no matter what you work in, whether it's education, in a corporate setting, and a lot of live production guys got some new job opportunities too, which was, they were like, I told you, Mom, I told you that this would work,
Oh, yeah. Well, I think about graduating with a film degree, people were like, that's a joke of a major,
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Underwater basket weaving.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
Father-in-law says a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
But now it's like, I always think that, because I graduated mid-aughts, but that was right when YouTube hit. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, corporations had this huge need for online video. Mm-hmm. And so I jumped right in right away because there was a whole new market, that was open. Mm-hmm. And I feel like maybe we've seen something similar, like you touched on live there. I feel like live has been, since the pandemic in particular, that's really changed things a lot, right? From teams needing to produce more live stream content too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the equipment now is so much more accessible than it used to be, right? It's more approachable. The demands, from a content standpoint, from a production standpoint in the corporate market, they have, increased, exponentially over time. But at the same time, the broadcast equipment and the broadcast workflows have become more approachable and less complex, at least less complex forward-facing, right? Like, there's still a lot of complexity on the back end, but we don't really see that or interact with that a whole lot, where, 10, 20 years ago, like, you had to be a broadcast engineer to kind of keep those systems up and running, and it's just not that way anymore.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the rising expectations too. So it's not just the quantity of content that people are creating, but it's also the quality of it too.
Absolutely.
It's not just enough for your CEO to be sitting on a webcam, right? That's probably changed the equation quite a bit too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We look at so much content, right? We talked about that a moment ago, and we're naturally sort of conditioned to, like, oh, that looks good, or that doesn't look good. And a lot of people can't really quantify why that is, but it's a matter of all of what's coming at us, right? There's a certain level, and when there's something that doesn't fit inside of that, right? If there's something that's just kind of a lower quality production, it's instantly noticeable, right? And the same is true on the other side. When there's something that's like really, really well done, you notice, and you may not be able to articulate why, but like, oh, that's great, that's engaging, I really like the way that looks. And that is something that, companies who are trying to communicate both internally and externally, that is a way to hold attention and hold engagement, and to get people to, even for just a moment, stop and pay attention to what you've got to say.
Yeah, I don't know if I think it's probably an AVIXA stat, but just talking about engagement and why it's important, because of that reason, we're in a scroll world now, and it's like sub 1 second that you decide whether you're going to look at something. For our attention span, which is like sub 7 seconds now, So to keep somebody who's on the other side of a screen engaged in a conversation, they have to really want to know what's on there or be required to watch it. And even still, you're fighting for the attention of like, I can listen and kind of scroll through things, whether it's a blog or it's video, whatever it is. And so, yeah, having good quality, and this is where I think the AVIXA part or the article that I read was basically like, if you have low quality and it doesn't look as sharp as the thing before that, we just naturally nowadays, we go by it.
Yep.
We don't stop on the TV and watch anything. We don't sit there and like punch. We go to what we want and where we know we have quality. So a lot of that live production value comes with needing that engagement on the other side of whoever your audience is.
Right.
Yeah.
And once you get their attention, though, too, it's I always like to say that the quality that you put out says just as much about your brand as what the content says, right? So it is a reflection and extension of your brand. And so if you do work hard to get someone's attention, you got to make the most of it. And if their only impression is, this content's just subpar compared to the rest, that's going to be a poor reflection on you, too. So
it's an interesting point, too, because I was talking with an agency in New York a couple weeks ago for a trade show up there, and we were doing a visit. And they work with a ton of top tier brands, and one of the reasons they are looking into a more higher end broadcast-ish solution to run live events internally, but also to be able to give presentations to their clients, because they said, we're a top tier agency and our customers expect top tier service, but are we leveraging technology in a way that wows people when they come in to say like, okay, they're forward thinking, how can we keep the ball rolling in that space? So I loved that. It's not just corporate communications, it's how can I leverage presentation? So like AR, I mean, football in America is next level for not just the game, but because of everything that goes on around it. The graphics that are around the stadium, the on-air graphics, the AR as the camera's flying over the field, and you have the AR robot giving his little nod, and somehow Tom Brady would have the buff, and it's all these things, and so they want to leverage that too to basically take their branding and turn it up so that the people that work for them in branding know that they can turn it up, and that is moving. That's an outcome-driven need for technology, which is really cool to see this when you can put those kind of products in place to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, speaking of putting products in place, let's talk a little bit about the AVIXA TV studio here.
Yes.
Again, we've had wonderful support. Thank you, first and foremost, for our friends at Ross Video. Talk us through a little bit about maybe what you all have provided and what the different functionality that's going to give us as a team.
So here we have. Here we have an Ultrix, so that's the core of this system. It's our hyper-converged platform. We can do all sorts of things with that frame. We can put a switcher in it. We've got a bunch of different modules that are going to give us all sorts of different connectivity options. Here we have a standalone switcher with. Or no, we don't.
Nope, it's in the Ultrix.
It is in the Ultrix.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the switcher is actually one of the blades in the Ultrix as well. So everything's kind of in that platform. We did Expression, which is our real-time graphics engine. We've got that up and running here, and a Tria. So it's a 4-channel record and playback device that we've got in here as well.
Yeah, we're sitting right now in what was previously a conference room. And this is actually probably something that's common application that you all have probably seen. But taking space, after the pandemic, we went and became a remote-first workplace. So we have plenty of real estate left in the office now, but we do have growing needs now for our video content with AVIXA TV. Maybe talk to me a little bit about that. Is that something that you're seeing kind of across the board in terms of different corporations looking to repurpose the space that they have to, equip the content teams that they have in-house?
Yeah, that's why we went with the solution with you guys too, was because there's a growing need for the remote support. Shameless plug. We're the AVIXA Power Hour, remote production. So one of the benefits of using the hyper-converged, as we call it, kind of platform is that ability for remote support. So you guys are a great example because you're a global company. You have a global need to support media, to support whatever's going on. If you have your team in London and you need to have a high quality production, you could call in and you can leverage the solution to switch something in real time versus leaving it up to a SaaS platform or collaboration platform to host that call from start to finish, right? So you can put a production solution in place in front of that call so you can ISO record. So like the Tria, you could ISO record different channels of that. You can ISO record your output. So you can edit that in post if you need to and go back and make tweaks or add content to it if you want. So there's little benefits like that. And then also locally, you're an hour north, another part of your team's an hour south, you know, and so there's the need of this remote usability for people to they have a few engineers or one engineer, but they have to support multiple work sites. So, and it's not just us, it's a lot of other companies that can do it too. So there's other ways you can get around it. But yeah, it's a ever more increasing need is remote production control. We even work with a company that's down in Australia, and they're putting kind of contributing sites from all over the globe that can be controlled from Australia or from New York, things like that. We have another company that we were working with in New York who they have sites across the street from each other. And when we walked in, they're like, we just need it to work. And we want a way to have control over a show and it look good. And if I need to scale it to run in Houston or in London, I need to be able to do that. And that's where the big growth is happening. There's a lot of controlled environments where it's smaller and it needs to do a function, but where we see a lot of engagement is for the people who are either national or they have multiple workplaces or they're global and they need to connect all these people. And it's a new way of doing business now. So yeah, it's really cool what's kind of going on in the industry as a whole.
That's been the biggest change from my perspective, especially since the pandemic, was the need for, like you're saying, the remote support. Just for us, again, like you had mentioned, we're kind of geographically spread out now as a video team. And so, but we do have people here. We've got people coming through the building all the time for different meetings and things that would make for great interviews. But maybe we're tied up with another project and we can't make it down. So to have that flexibility, just tap one of our team members. Hey, we're going to rig up some PTZ cameras, so to have full remote control over them. You know, that for me, that was one of the most exciting things. Just because it unlocks so many opportunities for us that we would not have been able to capture as easily as we could have in the past. So.
The other cool thing, I mean, especially you're in a big metro area, so DC metro area. If you're in New York or California, and you start putting these solutions in, the other big benefit to this is you have kind of a bigger bank of people that you can leverage to contract in as well. So a lot of times we have customers who want the easy button where they come in and it's easy mode, or we can make custom panels to where you could switch a show remote, but there's sometimes you want somebody in-house sitting in the seat and you want more production interaction. So you want the graphics, you want the lower thirds to come in, and it needs to be live. So you can have your custom panel to run a show remote, but you also can have the physical panel sitting in the control room on the other side of the wall and punch everything up. So it just gives you that much more and added flexibility and probably value, I'd say, to the end product, no matter what it is. So that flexibility and what the outcome or what the purpose of the solution is, it's an added benefit versus just rolling kind of with the Zoom call that we all kind of had to be on. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, right? The added benefit to the collaboration platform that you're leveraging. So
yeah, that's great. Let's talk for a minute just about maybe some of, like I said, so one of the first studios I was a part of renovating was one where it was just kind of an open space that we used for video. But what are you maybe seeing, Peter, in particular? What would be your encouragement to maybe some people who are like, I'm on the fence, like we've got a studio, we need to up it, but maybe there's some misconceptions or fears that they might have that would be good for them to have addressed up front about making the jump into more live, more broadcast technologies, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, well, the short answer to that is it's not as hard as you think it is. You know, there is a little bit of, trepidation when you move into a completely different, workflow. Now, that being said, you mentioned just a moment ago about, and this is particularly important, I think, in this market, is things just have to work.
Yeah.
When we're talking C-level executives that have a message, they need to come in, say what they have to say, and get out. Right? They don't have the time to sit and wait for, let me set this up, let me move the camera around, I got to tweak the light, I can't get your PowerPoint up on the screen. All of that stuff is just not acceptable, right? So a number of years ago, I did a corporate show. It was actually during the pandemic. It was sort of a last minute thing. It's like, oh no, we've got our shareholders meeting and we've got our end of the year business reports and all this stuff, and our all of our executives are spread out over the country and nobody's allowed, or all over the world, nobody's allowed to travel. What are we going to do? And so they spent all of this time and money, putting together this live production to make it work. And when it came time to actually do it, it was just really simple. And the CEO came, he delivered his message. He was on site for 45 minutes, maybe. Came in, said his thing, everything was set and ready to go, and he left. And that's what really I think is the most important thing, is to be able to just walk in and expect it's going to work. Yep. And the broadcast tools have always been about that, right? It's 100% uptime. It's comes from like breaking news and live events and places where if something goes wrong, you just don't have time to deal with it. So something going wrong is not an option. And I think in the AV space, that's been different historically, right? You've got a little bit of time to work on getting somebody's PowerPoint up on the screen, or you can do a Zoom test call and all that thing, or collaboration platform.
Yep.
So yeah, the short answer is it's not as hard as you think. The tools are available, and they will make your life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Yep.
And you don't have to be on site anymore.
Yeah. Huge benefit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's. You were mentioning kind of that the fear that people might have of just maybe the unknown. Mm-hmm. But what are, thinking about individually then, what are some of the skill sets that you would recommend to someone who's maybe younger in their career? Mm-hmm. What should they learn about? What should they dive into to equip themselves to be able to run these broadcast systems?
This isn't video related, but I'd say get Dante certified. Just understand basic routing, workflows, things like that. Because honestly, if you look at our Ultrix compared to a Dante, it's laid out very similarly. You have sources, you have destinations. Once you start understanding sources, destinations, one doesn't always mean one. You can patch different ways and understand workflow and signal flow. You're going to be way ahead of the game in terms of getting into a digital workflow. I'd also say leverage. We have Ross University, which is just you can get anything Ross for the most part on there. Personally, I was a CTS holder from Infocom. So if you're going into AV,
there we go.
It really is a good thing to do because it's a pain in the butt. Okay, I'm sorry. It's a
Don't
pain.
tell Dave.
Don't tell Dave. Love you, Dave. But the thing is, you have to have such a broad knowledge with the CTS, and that's why it's annoying, but also why it's very valuable, because it's not just, you need to know how many lights can cover a room adequately to get good coverage, and same for audio and video standards, things like that. So as you continue to grow, the more knowledge you have to go into this, the easier it will be, because you'll start to understand programming, you'll start to understand workflow. So I'd say don't focus on one single thing. I think that's, I think we're in a funny spot in general because of probably our age group of we've lived in analog land, and so we kind of understand the analog land, and the guys that are kind of 10 years older than us hate the digital land, and so there wasn't a good kind of merging there. But now what I think I see a lot, because if you're in a church or in a live production setting, some guys don't understand analog land at all. So when there's actually a really basic fix, they kind of don't know what to do because they're looking at the screen versus the source maybe first, and it's just an example. But so I'd say stay broad with it. But I think if you, from a practical education standpoint, AVIXA, Ross University, Audinate, I don't know if they call it university, but get the Dante certification and things like that. But also immerse yourself in live environments. I think that will help out a ton. And then if you're university age, we're in a ton of universities across the country, across the globe. So if you're going into a broadcast journalism or media program, you're learning real time what the people in New York, every morning show and every 24/7 news network is using. So I'd say just keep your eyes open to what's out there and don't say no to anything.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, understanding signal flow, because that's one of those things that doesn't change, right? Whether we're in a digital world or an analog world, we still have a source, we still have a destination, and we've got a bunch of stuff in between, right? And so understanding what that means and how we get a signal from a source to a destination is important, because whether that means patching cables or sitting in front of a screen and making virtual routes, understanding how to get from point A to point B is really important. And I would also say don't discount other disciplines, right? So what I mean is if you're building a studio, right, you're probably focused most on the video equipment, the camera equipment, but a camera only sees what's there, right? So it has to be lit well. That's something a lot of people don't think of, right? Lighting is hugely important to video. Same thing with audio. If you don't have good audio, again, going back to that engagement, you're not going to be in. People aren't going to pay attention if they have to really think about hearing what you're saying. Those are kind of the two things that I would say are foundational, very important. But if you can grab hold of those two things, then you'll be really successful.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you guys. It's been the first AV Unplugged. You made it. Thank you for sitting with us and talking a little bit about the AVIXA TV studio broadcast as well. Really appreciate you guys coming on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.